March 14th, 1959, Harlem, New York. 4 men took Bumpy Johnson's wife in 97 minutes and demanded $100,000 by midnight. By dawn, she was home untouched, and the Mafia never tried Harlem again. This wasn't panic or revenge, it was strategy. So what did Bumpy Johnson do in those 4 hours to end the game without firing a shot? To understand how the story goes, back to the moment he stayed silent. March 14th, 1959. 6:47 in the evening. The hallway outside apartment 4C smelled like pine sol and rust from pipes that leaked brown water when the super bled the radiators. Marisol Johnson turned her key. The deadbolt slid back. She pushed the door inward 6 inches before the hand came from behind and crushed the chloroform rag against her face hard enough to flatten her nose against her teeth. The chemical punched through her sinuses like breathing lighter fluid. She tried to scream. The sound strangled in her throat. Her knees buckled. 2 men grabbed her before gravity could slam her skull into the doorframe. They hauled her like longshoremen moving a side of beef. One locked his fingers around her shoulders. The other hooked both ankles and lifted. They carried her down the back stairs in 14 seconds, while Ellington bled through the neighbor's wall, and the basement furnace hammered like someone swinging a tire iron against a boiler tank. Nobody opened a door. Nobody looked. Harlem knew when to go blind. The Lincoln Continental idled at the curb engine, turning low black paint, swallowing the streetlight whole. Chrome bumpers caught the glow like scalpel edges. They shoved her across the leather seat. 1 man wedged in beside her, his knee driving into her hip to pin her against the far door. "Touch her dress and Gigante will cut your hands off at the wrist," the driver said. "I know what Gigante will do." The driver eased away from the curb without punching the gas, rolling smooth and legal. They obeyed. Every light stayed 5 under the limit, kept 2 car lengths behind the taxi ahead. Invisible. Professional. 90 seconds. That was how long it took to carve Marisol Johnson out of Harlem, like cutting a kidney from a man still breathing. The man in the back seat kept his palm flat against Marisol's collarbone, pressing her down into the leather. Her eyes were half open, rolling back white. The chloroform had her underwater. She moves, you hold her. She makes noise, you put the rag back on her face. Gigante wants her clean. No marks. No bruises. We are delivering a message, not a corpse. They drove south through Harlem, while the Friday night crowd filled the sidewalks, couples heading to clubs, men laughing outside corner bars. The city moved around them like nothing had just cracked open. At 7:02 in the evening, the phone rang in Bumpy Johnson's office above Wells Restaurant on 7th Avenue. He lifted the receiver on the second ring. "Your wife, 100,000. Midnight." The voice carried a Bronx rasp over Sicilian vowels. Flat. The kind of voice that had delivered this message before to other men in other cities. No elaboration about pliers and her fingernails. No description of how they would send pieces of her back in a shoebox. Professionals, let your imagination do the wet work. The line went dead. 14 words. 13 seconds. Dial tone. Illinois Gordon stood near the door with his hand inside his coat, where the .38 pressed against his ribs. He watched Bumpy's face for the signal to start putting holes in people. "I will get the car. We hit every location they use. We break every door until..." "No, Bumpy, set the receiver down like placing a bishop on a chessboard." He reached for the Hennessy bottle, poured 2 fingers, dropped in a single ice cube. The cube fractured when the cognac hit it. The sound was sharp in the quiet, like a knuckle being torqued backward until the joint popped. Illinois stared at him. "They have Marisol." "I heard the phone call." "Then why are you pouring liquor like we have time to drink?" Bumpy took 1 sip. Not a gulp that would show his throat closing. A single sip that said his hands were steady. His pulse controlled his brain, not flooding with panic. Because panic is currency. They want me panicking. Panicking makes you sloppy. Sloppy gets you dead or arrested. Either way, they win. The overhead bulb swung from the elevated train passing 2 blocks north. Cigar smoke hung dense beneath the light fixture. Illinois took 2 steps toward the desk. Then tell me what we are doing, because standing here while they have her is making me want to put my fist through that wall. Get my coat. Illinois grabbed the coat from the rack and brought it over. Bumpy slipped it on, buttoned it once, adjusted his hat brim. Down on 7th Avenue, couples walked toward the jazz clubs. A cab honked. Someone laughed. The city kept breathing like Harlem had not just been gutted. Call Freddie at the Hotel Teresa. Tell him I need the 6th floor suite. Empty, now. What else? Call Roosevelt Washington. Tell him I need him at the hotel in 1 hour. Kitchen entrance. Illinois hesitated. The janitor from Mulberry Street. You know another Roosevelt? Illinois dialed, spoke low, hung up. Bumpy was already moving toward the door. They think this is about ransom. They think I pay the $100,000 they give her back. I swallow the insult. They think Harlem is a soft now. That the old man lost his edge. What is it actually about? 50 million a year. That is what flows through this neighborhood. Gigante wants it. The commission told him Harlem is open territory. So Gigante tests the fence. He puts his hands on Marisol to see if I break or fold. They walked down the back stairs into the alley. The night air burned the lungs. A tomcat knocked over a trash can. Glass shattered somewhere on the avenue. The city kept moving because cities do not stop when someone declares war with a chloroform rag and a phone call. Illinois unlocked the Cadillac. Where are we going? Hotel Teresa. Then we make phone calls. To who? People who owe me. People who remember when I kept the Italians from burning their buildings and stomping their faces into the curb. They climbed in. Illinois fired the engine. Before he shifted into gear, he turned to Bumpy. What did Roosevelt hear at the courthouse 3 weeks ago? 4 words: Lincoln, March 135th, wife. Illinois went still. His hands tightened on the steering wheel until the leather squeaked. You knew this was coming. Yes. And you did nothing. You did not move Marisol. You did not change her routine. You did not put extra guns on the building. No. Why the hell not? Bumpy stared through the windshield at the brick wall. Because ending a war is not about stopping the first punch. It is about letting them throw it, then breaking their arm so badly they never think about throwing another one. You cannot teach that lesson if you block the punch before it lands. Illinois put the car in gear and rolled onto 7th Avenue. The dashboard clock read 7:15. Bumpy smoked and watched the street slide past. After 2 blocks, he spoke again. How long did it take them to grab her like a... 90 seconds. The super saw the Lincoln pull away at 6:48. 90 seconds. Clean. Professional. Gigante sent experienced people. Does that matter? Everything matters. The cleaner the job, the more confident they feel. The more confident they feel, the less they watch their backs. And when you stop watching your back, that is when someone puts a knife in it. They turned onto 125th Street. The Hotel Teresa rose ahead, 10 stories of limestone and brick. Illinois pulled to the curb. Bumpy opened his door, stepped out, flicked his cigarette into the gutter where it sparked and died. Midnight is the deadline they gave me. 4 hours is what I actually have. By sunrise, Marisol will be home drinking coffee, and Vincent Gigante will understand that Harlem is not a neighborhood you test. It is a closed border. Illinois killed the engine. What makes you so sure? Bumpy looked at him across the roof of the Cadillac. Because I already know where they are holding her. I know which 4 men carried her down those stairs. I know what time Gigante's driver picks him up tomorrow. And I know that Maria Russo goes to Our Lady of Sorrows every morning at 6 to light candles and pray for her 2 sons. Who is Maria Russo? The mother of the Russo brothers. The 2 men sitting in that safe house right now, thinking they just checkmated the king. Bumpy walked toward the hotel entrance. Illinois followed. Inside, the lobby smelled like furniture polish and old carpet. A woman laughed near the bar. A phone rang at the front desk. Harlem kept living because Harlem did not stop for kidnappings or wars or the violence that had not been spilled yet but would be soon. To understand why Vincent Gigante thought he could put his hands on Marisol Johnson and walk away, breathing, you need to understand what Harlem was in 1959 and who controlled it. Bumpy Johnson had run Harlem for 18 years. Not like a gangster. Like a mayor who happened to carry a gun and settle disputes with his fists when votes did not work. When Mrs. Patterson on 132nd Street could not make rent because her husband drank his paycheck, Bumpy paid it. When the Reynolds boy got accepted to Howard University, but had no tuition money, Bumpy wrote the check. When someone died and the family could not afford a funeral, Bumpy made sure they went into the ground with dignity and flowers and a priest who did not ask questions about where the money came from. This was not charity. Was not. This was infrastructure. Every dollar Bumpy spent buying loyalty was a dollar he did not have to spend on bullets. The people of Harlem did not love him because he was kind. They loved him because he kept the Italians from burning their buildings, kept the corrupt cops from shaking them down every week, kept the heroin dealers from selling to children on playgrounds. He was the wall between them and the wolves. And when you are the wall people, do not ask what you do in the dark. On a Friday night in February 1959, Bumpy sat in the back booth at Small's Paradise, listening to Duke Ellington on the jukebox and watching three Italian men drink Barolo at a table near the bar. The wine was from 1934, the year Prohibition died, and the Mafia stopped pretending they were businessmen and started acting like it. The Italians were loud. They laughed. They slapped the table. They acted like they owned the place. One of them made eye contact with Bumpy and raised his glass in a mock toast. Illinois. Gordon leaned across the booth. You want me to walk over there and break that glass across his face? No. They are disrespecting you in your own place. They are testing me. There is a difference. The Italians finished their wine and left. Their shoes clicked across the hardwood floor like hammers on nails. When the door closed behind them, Illinois turned back to Bumpy. How long are we letting them test? Until they make a mistake big enough that I can bury them for it. Illinois lit a cigarette. They are going to make a move. You know that. I know. When? Soon. Gigante is hungry. The commission gave him the green light to expand. And Harlem is $50 million a year in numbers, protection, loan sharking card games. That kind of money makes men forget the rules. The rules. The Mafia had rules about families. You did not touch wives. You did not touch children. You did not bomb houses or shoot up kitchens or drag women into cars in broad daylight. Those rules kept the wars from turning into massacres that brought federal heat in congressional hearings. But rules are only rules when breaking them costs more than keeping them. Marisol Johnson was not just Bumpy's wife. She was the daughter of Stephanie St. Clair, the woman they called Madam Queen, the woman who had run the Harlem numbers racket in the 1920s and 1930s before Bumpy took over. Stephanie had been a legend. She once took out a full-page ad in the Amsterdam News listing every cop in Harlem who was on the take, their badge numbers, their precincts, how much they charged per week to look the other way. The police commissioner had tried to shut her down. She sent him photographs of himself leaving a brothel on 125th Street. He stopped trying. When Stephanie retired, she handed Harlem to Bumpy with one condition. He married her daughter. It was not romance. It was dynasty. Bumpy needed legitimacy. Marisol gave him a bloodline that connected him to Harlem royalty. Touching Marisol was not just an insult to Bumpy. It was an insult to 20 years of history, to every number runner and card dealer and street captain who remembered when Stephanie St. Clair told the Italians to stay south of 110th Street, or she would mail their teeth back to their mothers in a cigar box. Vincent Gigante did not care about history. He cared about $50 million a year. He was 30 years old, ambitious, violent, and stupid enough to think that age equaled weakness. He looked at Bumpy and saw a man in his 50s who settled disputes with conversations instead of car bombs. He saw soft. He saw an opening. In a restaurant on Mulberry Street in late February, Gigante sat with 4 of his captains and laid out the plan. They would hit the numbers parlors first, burn 3 of them in one night. Send the message that Harlem was no longer protected. Then they would move on the card games, the loan operations, the protection routes. They would carve Bumpy's empire into pieces and divide it among themselves. And if Bumpy pushed back, they would remind him that he was one man with a handful of soldiers facing a family with 1,000 made men and connections that reached into every police precinct and city office in New York. One of the captains asked the question that should have stopped the whole thing. "What about Bumpy's wife?" Gigante smiled. "What about her?" "The rules say we do not touch families. The rules also say we do not let coloreds run 50 million a year in our city. So which rule matters more?" Nobody answered. Gigante leaned back in his chair and sipped his espresso. "We take the wife. We hold her for a day. We make Bumpy pay 100,000 to get her back. And while he is scrambling to find the cash, we burn his operations to the ground. By the time he gets her back, he will have nothing left to fight with." It was a good plan. It would have worked on most men. But Bumpy Johnson was not most men. And Vincent Gigante had just made the kind of mistake that ends with your mother lighting candles in a church and praying for a son who is never coming home. When profit is large enough, the thing you call principle becomes decoration. You hang it on the wall like a painting and you tell yourself it matters. But when someone offers you 50 million a year, you take the painting down and sell it for scrap. That is what Gigante did. He looked at the rule about not touching families, and he decided it was worth less than the Harlem rackets. He was wrong, and in 4 hours he would understand exactly how wrong. February 21st, 1959. 3 weeks before the Lincoln Continental idled outside apartment 4C. Roosevelt Washington was mopping the third-floor hallway of the Mulberry Street courthouse when he heard 4 words that would change how the war for Harlem ended. Roosevelt was 62 years old. He had mopped floors in that courthouse for 18 years. He wore gray coveralls that smelled like industrial soap and ammonia. He was invisible. Not because he tried to be, because people with power do not see the help. They see furniture that moves and empties trash cans and keeps the floors clean enough that their expensive shoes do not stick to the marble. The hallway outside courtroom 3B had an alcove where lawyers and cops stood smoking during recesses. Roosevelt was mopping near that alcove when 2 men in expensive suits walked past him like he was a coat rack. One of them was talking. Roosevelt kept his head down and pushed the mop in slow circles across the stone floor. The mop head made a wet scraping sound. The ammonia burned his nostrils. The man who was talking said 4 words that Roosevelt memorized before he understood why they mattered. "Lincoln, March 135th, Marisol." The other man laughed. Then they walked down the hallway and their voices faded. Roosevelt finished mopping. He emptied his bucket in the janitor closet. He clocked out at 5. He took the subway to Harlem, and at 6:30 that evening he knocked on the back door of Wells' restaurant and asked to speak with Bumpy Johnson. Illinois Gordon opened the door with his hand on his gun. "What do you want?" "I need to speak with Mr. Johnson." "About what?" "Something I heard today that he needs to hear tonight." Illinois stared at him for 5 seconds. Then he stepped aside. Roosevelt climbed the back stairs to Bumpy's office. Bumpy was sitting at his desk reading the Amsterdam News and drinking coffee. He looked up when Roosevelt walked in. "Mr. Washington, you are early for chess night." "I am not here for chess." Bumpy folded the newspaper. "Then why are you here?" Roosevelt told him. 4 words. Where he heard them, who said them, What time? When he finished, Bumpy was quiet for 30 seconds. Then he opened his desk drawer, pulled out an envelope, counted out $500 in 50s, and slid the cash across the desk. You did not hear anything today, Bumpy said. You were mopping. You were alone. Nobody spoke near you. Do you understand? Roosevelt took the money. I understand. If anyone asks, you have never been to this restaurant. You do not know who I am. You work at the courthouse, and you go home, and you mind your business. Yes, sir. Good. Leave through the kitchen. Do not come back here for 3 months. After 3 months, we play chess like always. Roosevelt left. Bumpy sat alone in his office for 2 hours. He did not call anyone. He did not leave. He put a record on the turntable and let Duke Ellington fill the room while he thought through every angle of what was about to happen. Illinois came upstairs once to ask if he needed anything. Bumpy told him no. Illinois went back downstairs. The music played. Bumpy did not hear a single note. What he heard was 4 words repeating in his head like a church bell. Lincoln. March. 135th. Marisol. He played out 3 scenarios in his mind the way a chess master thinks 6 moves ahead. Scenario 1 was evacuation. Move Marisol out of the city for a month. Put her in a safe house in Philadelphia. Surround her with guns. That scenario ended with the Italians trying again in 6 months, or a year. If he ran now, they would know they could make him run, and men who run once keep running until someone puts them down, like dogs in the street. Scenario 2 was a preemptive strike. Hit the Italians first. Burn their card games. Bomb their social clubs. Kill 2 of Gigante's captains and mail their fingers back in a cigar box. That scenario ended with federal heat civilians caught in crossfire and Harlem turning into a shooting gallery where children dodged bullets on their way to school. Scenario 3 was the trap. Let them come. Let them take Marisol. Let them think they won. Then hit them so hard, so precisely, so completely, that they would never consider touching Harlem again. Not because he threatened them, because he taught them a lesson they would remember every time they looked at their mothers. Bumpy chose Scenario 3. He stood up from his desk, walked to the window, and looked down at 7th Avenue. People were walking home from work. A cab honked. A street vendor was packing up his cart. The city kept moving because it did not know that in 3 weeks, the rules were about to change. Illinois was standing in the doorway. You have been sitting here for 2 hours. Are you going to tell me what you are thinking? I am thinking that ending a war permanently requires letting the other side believe they already won. If I protect Marisol now, they will try again later. If I hit them first, we start a war that kills people who have nothing to do with this. But if I let them take her and then break them for it, they will never touch Harlem again. Illinois stared at him. You are going to use your wife as bait. I am going to use their confidence as a weapon. What if something goes wrong? What if they hurt her? Nothing will go wrong, because I will know where she is who took her and what leverage I need to get her back before they even put her in the car. Illinois was quiet. You are betting everything on information. Information is the only thing worth betting on. Guns are loud. Information is silent. And silent is how you win wars without turning your neighborhood into a graveyard. Bumpy walked past Illinois and down the stairs. Outside, the March cold had teeth. He lit a cigarette and stood on the sidewalk watching the traffic. Illinois came out behind him. What do you need me to do? Find out everything about Vincent Gigante. Where he eats, where he drinks, who drives him, who he talks to. I want to know his schedule better than he knows it himself. Anything else? Find out who he trusts, who he sends when he needs something done quietly. I want names. I want addresses. I want to know if they have families and where those families live. Illinois nodded. How long do I have? 3 weeks. Maybe less. Bumpy dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. Order is not announced with words. It is carved into memory with one lesson so brutal, so surgical, so perfectly executed, that nobody ever forgets what happens when you cross the line. That was what Gigante was about to learn, and the classroom was going to be Harlem after dark. Over the next 7 days, Bumpy Johnson built a map of Vincent Gigante's operation, using the kind of people nobody notices until they need something. He did not use police informants or FBI wiretaps. He used waiters and doormen and shoeshine boys who heard everything because powerful men thought they were deaf. A waiter at Umberto's Clam House told Illinois that Gigante always ordered a double espresso at 9 in the morning and left a $2 tip. Illinois paid him $50 and told him if he repeated that conversation to anyone, they would find him floating face down in the Gowanus Canal, with his tongue cut out and stuffed in his pocket. A taxi driver who worked the Little Italy route said he had picked up the same man 3 times from a warehouse on Mott Street. He remembered the alley entrance in the back where the loading dock had a broken padlock. Illinois gave him $20 and a warning that if any cop heard about this ride, the driver would wake up in a hospital learning to eat through a straw. The information came back in pieces like bone fragments from a body they were assembling. Bumpy laid it out on his desk. Within a week, he knew where Gigante stored his cash. He knew the safe house address in the Bronx. He knew which warehouse stored hijacked cigarettes. He knew which doors had good locks and which ones you could kick in with one boot. But buildings do not kidnap wives. Men do. And Gigante would not do this himself. He would send people he trusted. Illinois came back with 4 names after spending 3 days in the restaurants and card games where Gigante's men drank and talked too loud. He dropped a folder on Bumpy's desk. Paulie Carbone, 34, owes $18,000 to a bookie in Queens, 6 weeks behind on payments. The bookie sent 2 guys to his apartment last week and broke his bathroom mirror with his face. Bumpy opened the folder. What does Paulie need? Money fast. The bookie told him if he does not pay by the end of March, they are going to tie him to a chair and break every finger on his right hand with a ball-peen hammer. 1 finger per 1,000 he owes. So Paulie is desperate. Desperate men do stupid things for cash. Bumpy turned the page. Who else? Tommy DiNardo, 28, hothead. Thinks he is tougher than he is. Got into a fight at a bar on Hester Street 2 weeks ago and broke a bottle over a guy's head because the guy said his shoes looked cheap. Tommy wants respect. Tommy wants people to be scared of him. That makes him easy to predict. He will be the one who talks too much and tries to act like he is in charge. Bumpy flipped to the next page. And the Russo brothers, ha! Illinois lit a cigarette. Carlo and Vincent Russo, both in their 30s, both professionals. They do not drink heavy. They do not gamble. They have done work in Philadelphia and Boston, clean work, the kind where the target disappears and nobody asks questions. These are the ones Gigante trusts. These are the ones who will keep Paulie and Tommy from doing something stupid like leaving marks on your wife or panicking and moving her. Carlo and Vincent are there to make sure the job goes smooth. Bumpy closed the folder. Where do they eat breakfast? Illinois pulled out his notebook. Carlo goes to the same diner in Brooklyn every morning at 7, sits at the counter, orders eggs over easy rye toast, black coffee. Out the door by 7:30. And Vincent. Vincent fills his tank at the same Texaco on Flatbush every Thursday at 8 in the morning, pays cash, buys a pack of Lucky Strikes. Bumpy stood and walked to the window. Down on 7th Avenue, the evening crowd was starting to gather outside the clubs. Someone laughed. A car horn blared. The city kept moving like it did not know that in 2 weeks 4 men were going to grab a woman off the street and start a war they could not finish. What about their families? Bumpy asked. Illinois hesitated. You want to know about their families? I want to know about their mothers. Illinois flipped through his notes. Paulie's mother is dead. Tommy's mother lives in Jersey with his sister. The Russo brothers have a mother in Bensonhurst, Maria Russo, 67 years old, widow, lives alone in a row house on Bay Ridge Parkway. Does she go to church? Every morning, 6 a.m. Mass at Our Lady of Sorrows, sits in the same pew. Lights candles, prays for her sons because she knows what kind of work they do. Bumpy turned from the window. Does she live alone? Yes, no dogs. The neighbors know her, but they do not talk much. Her sons visit every Sunday for dinner. That is it. Bumpy walked back to his desk and sat down. He pulled out a piece of paper and wrote Maria Russo's name at the top. Under it, he wrote the address. Under that, he wrote 6 a.m. Mass. He folded the paper and put it in his desk drawer. Illinois watched him. What are you thinking? I am thinking that Gigante picked the wrong men for this job. Paulie is desperate. Tommy is loud. And the Russo brothers think they are professionals. But professionals do not leave their mothers unprotected in a city where everyone knows everyone. You are going to use their mother. I am going to teach Vincent Gigante that when you touch someone's family, you better make sure your own family is not standing in the open with a target painted on their back. Illinois crushed his cigarette in the ashtray. That is cold. Cold keeps people breathing. If I go after Gigante directly, this turns into a war. Buildings burn, people die. Civilians get caught in the middle. But if I go after the one thing the Russo brothers cannot afford to lose, they fold. And when they fold, Gigante loses his best men and his reputation in the same night. What if they hurt Marisol before you can move? They will not hurt her. Carlo and Vincent are professionals. They know that damaged merchandise costs them everything. They will keep her clean. And while they are sitting in that safe house thinking they won, I will be sitting in a room with their mother making sure they understand what losing actually feels like. Illinois stood. When do we move on, Maria? The day they take Marisol, not before. If we move early, they change the plan. If we move after we lose leverage, we move the same day. Same hour if we can manage it. We take Maria off the street so quietly that nobody even knows she's in until her sons get a phone call. Illinois headed for the door. Then he stopped and turned back. This is the kind of move that ends careers. If it works, Gigante never touches Harlem again. If it does not work, we start a war. Bumpy looked at him. That is why it has to work. And that is why the Russo brothers are going to be the ones who make sure it does. Real leverage does not come from how many men you have or how many guns you can put on the street. It comes from knowing what your enemy loves more than winning. And on March 14, 1959, the Russo brothers were going to learn that their mother was worth more than $50 million and Vincent Gigante's respect combined. At 6:47 in the evening on March 14th, 4 men grabbed Marisol Johnson off the street in 90 seconds. At 7:02, Vincent Gigante's man made the phone call demanding $100,000 by midnight. Bumpy stood in his office holding the receiver, while Illinois Gordon watched his face for signs of panic. There were none. Bumpy's hand did not shake, but the veins in his forearm stood out like cables under the skin pulled tight by the effort it took to stay calm when every instinct told him to grab a gun and start breaking down doors. Illinois saw it. What do you need? I need you to make a phone call. Tell our people in Brooklyn that Maria Russo is on schedule. Illinois went still. They already have her. They picked her up at 6:30, 17 minutes before the Russo brothers put their hands on Marisol. At 6:30 that morning, Maria Russo had walked out of her row house on Bay Ridge Parkway carrying her rosary beads and heading to Our Lady of Sorrows for 6 o'clock Mass like she did every morning. A car pulled up beside her. 2 men got out. They were not Italian. They were not from any crew that Gigante would recognize. They were men Bumpy had borrowed from an old friend in Baltimore who owed him a favor from 1947 when Bumpy had kept that friend's brother from being gutted like a fish in a kitchen on Eastern Avenue. One of the men smiled at Maria. "Excuse me, ma'am. We are lost. Can you tell us how to get to the church? Maria stopped. She was a grandmother who went to Mass every day and believed that helping strangers was what God wanted. Our Lady of Sorrows is 2 blocks that way. Would you mind showing us? We are not from around here. She hesitated. Then she nodded. They walked with her to the corner. When they reached the alley, one of them touched her elbow gently and said, "This way is faster." She turned into the alley. The car was waiting. They did not grab her. They did not put their hands over her mouth. One of them said, "Mrs. Russo, we need you to come with us for a few hours. Nobody is going to hurt you. We just need you to sit quietly and drink some tea until this is over." She looked at them. "My sons will kill you for this. Your sons are going to thank us. Now get in the car." They drove her to an apartment in Sunset Park that Bumpy had rented 2 weeks earlier under a name that did not exist. Inside there was a couch, a television, a pot of hot tea on the stove. They sat her down and turned on the television. One of them brought her a blanket. The other poured the tea. They did not tie her hands. They did not lock her in a room. They sat with her and watched the morning shows like this was a social visit. Maria held her rosary beads. The wooden beads clicked together as she moved them through her fingers. Outside, the church bells at Our Lady of Sorrows rang for 7 o'clock Mass. She was not there. For the first time in 11 years, her pew was empty. At 7:15 in the evening, Bumpy Johnson dialed the number for Vincent Gigante's social club on Mulberry Street. A man answered on the 3rd ring. "Put Gigante on the phone." "Who is this?" "Tell him it is Bumpy Johnson. Tell him I am calling about the Lincoln Continental and the woman inside it. Tell him he has 60 seconds to pick up this phone or Maria Russo dies in a basement in Brooklyn." There was silence. Then footsteps. Then Gigante's voice, tight and controlled. "You are bluffing. The safe house is on Arthur Avenue, 3rd floor. Blue door. The man watching the door is named Sal, and he smokes Chesterfields. He lights a new one every 12 minutes. Tommy DiNardo is inside playing cards and losing. Paulie Carbone is in the kitchen eating a sandwich. Carlo and Vincent Russo are in the back room with my wife. They are sitting at a table under a bare bulb. There is a radio playing. The dial is set to 1010 wins. Do you want me to tell you what color shirt Carlo is wearing, or are we done pretending I do not know everything?" Gigante said nothing. "You have 60 minutes to put my wife in a cab and send her home. She gets out of that cab with her dress clean, her face untouched, and not a single hair out of place. If she does not, Maria Russo's sons will get a phone call telling them their mother is in a hole in Red Hook, and the only way they see her again is if they dig. You would kill an old woman over this. You put your hands on my wife. So yes, I will do whatever it takes. The difference between you and me is I do not pretend I have rules. You talk about family and respect and honor, but you grabbed a man's wife off the street because you wanted his money. So do not lecture me about what I would or would not do. You started this, I am finishing it. If anything happens to Maria, then you should have thought about that before you touched Marisol. 60 minutes, starting now." Bumpy hung up. Illinois stared at him. What if he does not fold? He will fold, because Carlo and Vincent Russo love their mother more than they love Vincent Gigante's money. And when they find out we have her, they will put Marisol in a cab themselves. At 8:35, a yellow cab pulled up in front of the apartment building on 135th Street. The door opened. Marisol Johnson stepped out. Her dress was not wrinkled. Her face was not marked. Her hair was pinned exactly the way it had been when she left that morning. She walked into the building and climbed the stairs to apartment 4C. Bumpy was waiting inside. He did not say anything. He pulled her close and held her for 30 seconds. Then he let go. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did they touch you, Ho?" "No." They were scared. I could see it in their faces. Something happened while I was with them. They got a phone call, and after that they looked at me like I was made of glass. Bumpy walked to the phone and dialed. Release Maria Russo. Put her in a cab. Send her home. He hung up. Illinois stood near the door. It is over. Not yet. Tomorrow morning, Gigante and I are going to have breakfast, and he is going to pay for what he tried to do tonight. The weak need gunfire to prove they are dangerous. The strong need one phone call at the right time. On March 14, 1959, Vincent Gigante learned that Bumpy Johnson did not need to fire a shot to win a war. He just needed to know where your mother prayed. Getting Marisol back alive solved the problem of Friday night. It did not solve the problem of next month or next year when Gigante decided to try again with better planning and different men. Bumpy understood that wars do not end when you win a battle. They end when the other side stops believing they can win the war. At 9:17 on Saturday morning, Bumpy Johnson walked into Gallagher's Steakhouse on West 52nd Street and sat down at a table across from Vincent Gigante. He came alone. No Illinois Gordon. No guns. Just Bumpy in a gray suit and a hat he did not take off when he sat down. The restaurant went quiet. Waiters stopped pouring coffee. A fork froze halfway to someone's mouth. The kitchen door swung open, and the chef looked out saw what was happening and disappeared back inside. Everyone in that room knew who these two men were. Everyone knew what had happened the night before. And everyone knew that when men like this sit down together the morning after someone is about to pay for something. Gigante's jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. Bumpy folded his hands in front of him and looked at Gigante like he was studying an insect under glass. I made 6 phone calls last night after I got my wife back, Bumpy said. 1 to Carlo Gambino, 1 to Joe Bonanno, 1 to Tommy Lucchese, 1 to Joe Colombo, 1 to Frank Costello, 1 to Meyer Lansky. I told them what you tried to do. I told them you grabbed a man's wife off the street because you wanted his territory. I told them you broke the rule that keeps this business from turning into a slaughterhouse. Gigante said nothing. Those 6 men are very interested in how you thought this was going to work. They are very interested in how you plan to explain grabbing someone's wife when the commission has spent 30 years telling everyone that families are off limits. They are waiting for you to call them and explain yourself. And when you do, you are going to tell them that it was a mistake, that you acted without thinking, that it will never happen again. You want me to apologize. I want you to pay $50,000, cash, delivered to my office by Monday, and I want you to tell every man in your crew that Harlem is closed. No numbers, no card games, no protection rackets, no nothing. You stay south of 110th Street. You do not look north. You do not send anyone north. You pretend Harlem does not exist. Gigante leaned forward, and if I refuse, then I make 6 more phone calls. And those 6 men start asking questions about why you thought it was acceptable to put your hands on someone's wife. And when they finish asking questions, you will be lucky if all they do is break your legs and leave you in the street. Gigante stared at him. Bumpy did not blink. After 30 seconds, Gigante leaned back in his chair. 50,000. By Monday. And one more thing. You tell your people what happened last night. You tell them I had your men's mother before you even made the phone call. You tell them I knew where your safe house was, who was guarding it, what they were eating for dinner. You make sure they understand that trying this again means I will know about it before they do. Bumpy stood. He adjusted his hat. He walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Gigante sat at the table alone while the waiters started moving again and the kitchen door swung open and the restaurant pretended that nothing had happened. This is a story about how power operated in the shadows of mid-century New York. It is not a guide. It is not something to replicate. It is history. And history is full of men who used fear and information to control territory and people in ways that should never be repeated. Vincent Gigante's career stalled after March 1959. He stayed in the Genovese family, but his ambitions for rapid advancement died in that restaurant. The commission remembered what he tried to do. They remembered that he broke the rules and got humiliated for it. Carlo and Vincent Russo disappeared from New York 6 months later. They moved to Miami and worked for someone else under different names. Maria Russo never understood why her son stopped visiting her on Sundays. She lit candles for them every morning at Mass and prayed that they were safe. They were. But they were gone. Marisol Johnson lived another 30 years. She never spoke about what happened in that Lincoln Continental or in the safe house on Arthur Avenue. Harlem stayed Harlem, the Italians stayed south of 110th Street, and the lesson spread up and down the East Coast like a story whispered in the dark. Do not touch Harlem. Do not test the man who runs it, because he does not need bullets to bury you. He just needs to know where your mother prays. Real power does not come from violence. It comes from intelligence and the ability to make the other side choose to step back. On March 14, 1959, Bumpy Johnson taught that lesson in 4 hours without firing a shot. And for the next 20 years, nobody forgot it. The lesson here isn't about crime, it's about control. Real power doesn't rush, shout, or react. It pauses, gathers information, and moves only when the outcome is already decided. In life, the people who win aren't always the loudest or the strongest, but the ones who stay calm, while others panic, who think 3 steps ahead when pressure hits hardest. This story is shared for historical insight and personal reflection, not to promote violence or illegal behavior. Thank you for watching to the end. If this story made you think differently about power and patience, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us next time because the next story goes even deeper.